What was the scariest we need to leave now gut feeling you've ever experienced? My brother and I were kids playing hide and seek in the front yard of our house. My brother was 3 and I was 6. My brother was supposed to be counting and finding me, but he was taking forever, so I peeked around the side of the house to see what was taking so long. He lost interest in the game and was standing near the front gate, which led to the street. As I'm looking, I see a brown car pull up with 2 men inside. The car wasn't familiar, and neither were the men. They both got out of the car and approached my brother. They started asking him questions and moving closer to him. I remember feeling panicked. I had learned about stranger danger in school and knew this wasn't right. I ran around the side of the house, flew through the back door and screamed, "Someone is trying to kidnap Steve." My dad didn't hesitate. He got up and flew through the front door. When the men saw my dad coming through the door, they bolted and peeled out. From that day forward, we weren't allowed to play in the front yard anymore. It's a really scary memory for me. That's crazy. Those guys must have had ill intent. Otherwise, they wouldn't have peeled off like that after seeing his dad. Story 2. Does an "I need to go home now" feeling count? And it wasn't me, but my mom. Anyway, I was around 12 or so, and my mom left to go run an errand, leaving me alone. Very soon after she left, the doorbell rang. This was weird because we lived on a hill with only 2 neighbors. We all kept to ourselves, and we just didn't get random visitors. Thanks to some conveniently placed picture frames, I could see out the door without being seen. I look out and see a young man I don't recognize. He's dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, and something just feels off. So I ignore him and wait for him to leave, but he doesn't. He lingers and starts smoking. Again, this is an isolated hill. I'm alone, and now I'm getting scared. I go and hide and plan to wait for my mom, except she just left. Had a few errands to run, and I couldn't reach the phone without the guy seeing me. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, my mom comes home. She runs in and asks if I'm okay. Apparently, she got this random "go home now" urge. She hadn't even run her first errand yet, but turned around immediately. Found the guy in our yard and asked what he needed. I guess he muttered something about looking for someone, or something to that effect, and my mom told him to leave. Apparently, he was acting very strangely and made my mom nervous. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted, and no idea how my mom knew to come home, but I am very grateful she did. Story 3. My little sister and I went camping in the woods very close to our house when we were kids. We'd seen this bald guy with a blue shirt and a dog walking around, which isn't usual for the area. You'll often see people walking and say hello. For some reason though, I just got this tight feeling in my chest, and my sister must have too, because we both just gave each other this look. I don't know what it was that made me do it. This is very out of character for me. But I took a photo of the back of him as he was walking away. A while later, we see the same guy again near the lake. He comes over and asks about the tent we're carrying, where we'll be setting up, and are we camping with our dad? We say yes, we're just going to see him now. A lie. We must have had the same moment of psychicness because we walked off up a fork in the path until we were out of his view, then looked at each other and jumped down a path hidden by the bushes and waited behind them on a parallel trail for a bit. The guy watched us walk off, pretended to play with his dog until he couldn't see us. Then he turned around and ran up the path after us. Thankfully, he didn't see us hidden and carried on up straight where he thought we'd gone. We decided camping was a bad idea and went home. That evening, Mom showed us a post in the local residents group, which is a picture of the same bald guy trying to break into someone's house. Apparently, he'd just been walking around trying people's front doors and claimed to be a repair guy when he was stopped. I dread to darn think what his intentions were, but it was very lucky my sister and I knew those woods well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have thought to go down one of the hidden paths. Story 4. I was at a family gathering, basically a reunion, but just for family within reasonable driving distance, probably 30 people altogether. It was at a county park on a small lake with some grills and buildings, just an empty hall with some picnic tables inside. You could rent for this kind of stuff. The sky started darkening as a storm was approaching. All the coolers, chairs, balls, and other kids' toys, etc. were brought into the building, anticipating the rain. The plan was to wait it out since afternoon showers are common just about every day in the summer. Something in the air didn't feel or smell right, even though it appeared to be just a regular afternoon storm. Hair on my neck was standing up, and I was in full flight mode. Can't really describe it. The feeling in the pit of my stomach can only be described as absolute dread. I told my wife to take my daughter and get in the car. My brother-in-law took one look at my face and said, "What's wrong?" Apparently, I was white as a ghost. It wasn't even raining yet, and I was full on panic yelling for everyone to leave. Something isn't right. No one else was that worried, mostly concerned with how I was acting. I went out to the car, and as soon as I was about to turn the key, the tornado sirens went off. We were not far from wherever they put those, or they are just stupidly loud, because it was deafeningly loud. Now the rest of the family is pouring out of the building to their cars, kids crying, and I look across the lake, maybe a few miles in the distance, and see a funnel cloud. Got the hell out of there, as did everyone else. The building we had rented for this family barbecue thing was completely annihilated. Literally just a slab of concrete and a ton of debris all around. Story 5. Wednesday midday run along a beautiful river pathway near my apartment block. About 1 kilometer in, I felt people watching me and directly turned around and ran home, even though I did not see anybody. Closed the 2 magnetic gates leading up to my door and didn't see anybody around or follow me. About 10 minutes later, 2 guys were at my front door trying to push it in. I was luckily on the other side of the door at that moment and pushed it back closed with all my force and began screaming. I managed to security lock the door and text my apartment block for help. I was on the 2nd floor and they obviously watched which apartment I went into. Looking back at the apartment security cameras, they were able to see the 2 guys pull apart the magnetic security gates. 2 of them. The block then quickly changed the gates to a mechanical lock that cannot be pulled apart. Story 6. I bartend, and years ago I kicked this guy out because he was acting very strange, muttering under his breath that he would terminate my other customers, just really hostile. He had missing fingers on one hand, and he was kind of a bigger guy. After the bar closed, I almost finished counting money. So like an hour after everyone left, I was just about to leave, and I had that gut feeling. I looked out the window, and that guy was standing on the corner watching me in a ski mask. I know it was him because of the build. As soon as I grabbed my phone, he took off, but the cops know who he is. Now he has a vendetta out against me, and he's well known around town. He's darn nuts. Story 7. I was freshly married in my early 20s, living in Fallbrook, California. My husband, ex-husband, was a Marine and at work, and I was driving home from visiting family further south. In order to get into Fallbrook, you have to travel along this long, dark, and windy street called Mission Road. It's already a super dark night, about 11 p.m., and it's a little foggy as well. I'm slowing down and coming around this slight bend in the road, and all of a sudden, the hair goes up on my neck, and I feel incredibly anxious. About 5 seconds later, a young woman jumps out of the bush directly ahead of me, maybe 50 feet away, on the left-hand side of the road while waving her arms in the air and gesturing frantically for me to pull over. I swerved a bit to the right, slowing down even further, but I did not stop. She was young, maybe early 20s or even late teens, and a little dirty, and I was immediately conflicted over continuing to drive, but something told me not to stop under any circumstances. I got further up the road, slowed down a little more, and dialed 911 with one shaky hand. The dispatcher said she'd send someone to check, but encouraged me not to feel badly. Apparently, there had already been calls about this girl over the last hour, and they were unable to find her when police showed up. I heard a few weeks later about some carjacking/robbery attempts in the area. Very relieved I listened to my instincts that night. Story 8. I was at the state fair with my mom and my best friend. My friend and I were looking at the rides and the games. This creepy guy and his blonde girlfriend kept babbling at us about taking headshots and that he was a modeling agent. He just seemed off and really sleazy, and the girl was giving me the creeps. So I pretended that I saw my mom telling us to come and grabbed my friend and dragged her off. A few days later, there's a news story about rumors going around the school about 2 girls being kidnapped, taken advantage of, and terminated. They were taken from the fair that same day we were there, just a few hours earlier. The creepy couple were Gerald and Charlene Gallego, serial criminals. Story 9. I was 12 at the time, and my favorite thing in the world was spending the night at my grandma's house. We lived in the sticks at the time, and my grandma lived closer to the nearest town. Thursday night was grandma's night. I felt something off one Thursday night and asked my mom if I could just stay home with my mom and dad. They reluctantly agreed. I went home, watched some TV, and went to bed. My bedroom was on the adjoining wall to the living room. I wasn't really asleep, but I heard my mom keep saying my dad's name over and over again, with a hint of panic. I sneak out to the living room, and my dad is on the couch with his head tilted back, snoring, really loud, which wasn't uncommon, but my mom was beside him, shaking him and telling him to wake up. She yelled at me to go back to bed. I didn't, obviously. I snuck into their bedroom to call 911. I told the dispatcher that my dad was asleep and my mom was trying to wake him up, but she couldn't. Eventually, the phone call went to the living room and my mom talked to the dispatcher. They sent an ambulance to the middle of nowhere. My dad had taken a bottle of diazepam to try to end it all. I remember sitting on the floor and holding his hand and repeating over and over that I loved him. The ambulance came and took him to the hospital. Lights and sirens the whole way. We didn't know what happened during that time, but we found out a day later or so that is when our world changed. I am very sure if I did not call 911 that night that my dad would have succeeded and it would have probably driven my mom over the edge as well. And I have no idea why I didn't want to stay that night at my grandma's. I just had this feeling that I needed to go home. Story 10. I stopped by a friend's house to watch the ball game. He, his wife, and I were just relaxing, and someone knocked on the door. It was the middle of the afternoon. He opened it up. He was expecting others might come by also. I hear him greeting someone. The guy was his brother I'd never met, but had heard about. Very sketchy looking guy. Scrawny, long greasy hair. My friend had told me that he had a brother who lived in the area who had a serious substance issue. My buddy is talking to his brother about nothing and the guy gets a call on his cell. Whoever called, all he told him was, "Not yet, I'll call you later." It seems pretty obvious this guy has come to rob and most likely take out witnesses. I look at my buddy. It seems he has come to the same conclusion. Now, my buddy's wife is a no-nonsense type of woman. Sweet but athletic. On the tall side. She had left the room to go to the bathroom, or so she said. She comes back in the room with a handgun. I'm thinking, what the heck did I walk into? But she calmly says, "Ron, you're highly impaired and came here with bad intentions. You need to quietly leave. If you get any ideas, Chris, their son, is sitting outside in his truck to make sure you go." Ron doesn't say a word. He just turns around and goes out the door. We can hear his old pickup drive away rapidly. Chris comes in and says, "He's gone. I don't think he's coming back." They ask me to leave so they can decide what to do. They have already called the police, who are well acquainted with Ron. The next morning, my buddy calls me. The police said they found his brother in the trailer park where he lived, terminated with multiple gunshots. They are guessing he was in serious fixation-related debt and had come to rob his brother. I told my buddy I was sorry. He said, "Don't be." Story 11. Years ago, I was at a club with some friends. I was at the bar and for some reason looked down at the other end of the bar and saw two guys quietly arguing. They tried to keep from being overheard, but I saw their agitated faces. I went to my group of friends and told them we should go. This was a popular club and it took us forever to get in, so they didn't want to leave. I don't know what came over me, but I picked up my friend's girlfriend, she was barely 5 feet tall, and started walking to the door. She was kicking the entire time and the rest of the party followed me outside telling me to put her down. When we got outside, we heard the distant pop pop and people screaming. We looked at each other for a second, then ran for our cars. I forgot to put her down and was still carrying her over my shoulders. Story 12. I'm a teenage girl who worked at a restaurant/pizza shop. I was pestered by these two men one weekend who were totally wasted, so they were kicked out. The following weekend, they returned and they tried to sit right next to me at the counter which is connected to the bar, but they couldn't. So they chose a table across from me and moved both their seats to look right at me. Then they would only order from my counter instead of our waitresses. Were staring at me, making jokes about terminating a girl, and kind of just freaked me out. I ended up going to our upstairs employee-only section to fold boxes. Up there, all alone, down a hallway where nobody would hear me. I ended up feeling sick to my stomach as I heard someone walk up the stairs and whispering. I closed the door and turned my music off and texted my mom. The two followed me up there. They tried to go down the unlocked hallway, but another waitress noticed them bothering me and caught them trying to come after me. I just had a gut feeling as I heard them coming, and she came down the hallway and told me to be quiet and hold our body weight against the door. We waited for them to leave as they stood there, waiting for me to come out before making some remarks about not knowing where I was, then going back down. My dad came and picked me up early because I just felt so off. The following day I had to come in for another shift, and as I was clocking out, the TVs started playing a true crime documentary on a girl with the same name as me who was kidnapped and taken advantage of by two men. My stomach dropped and shortly gave my notice after that. I realized I wasn't going to be protected there and wouldn't be surprised if they returned again. Story 13. Sitting in my friend's backyard with their two kids, my husband, and another friend, enjoying pizza that my host made. It was a beautiful, clear day with no real wind. We're having a great time, just out of the pool and hungry for pizza. When I suddenly felt on edge, I looked straight at the kids, about 8 and 10 years or so old, and just said, "Get in the house." We all scramble, and a second later we heard creaking. Maybe 5 seconds after it started, this big branch fell off their pine tree onto the table we were sitting. Thankfully, no one was hurt besides having to pick pine needles out of our pizza. I can only assume that I subconsciously heard the branches starting to give. Story 14. When we were in our teens, my sister and I were walking our dog in our local forest area very close to our childhood home. We were about to leave and just clipped our dog back up when a lady appeared out of nowhere and started chatting with us. She was odd. She told us her dog would love some socialization with our dog and asked if we could go back with her for 5 minutes. What I hadn't noticed, but my sister had, was that her dog was nowhere to be seen. The lady was almost rounding us up to head back towards the forest when, little did I know, my sister had spotted a van out of the corner of her eye. I was still oblivious at this point. Suddenly, my sister screams, "Dad," and to our luck, my dad had finished work and was now out on a run. He starts waving and running towards us, and as we turn back around, the lady had vanished. My sister looks back over the van and sees the lady closing the passenger door and it's speeding off. The dog is still nowhere to be seen. I believe we were minutes away from abduction. It was divine intervention that my dad happened to be at the right place at the right time. Story 15. When I was around 9 or 10, my mom took me with her on a business trip to a nearby city. This is before smartphones, when you still had to MapQuest stuff. We were supposed to meet my mom's friend and coworker at the mall for something. Since her friend had given her directions, we didn't bother going down to the hotel computer to print out directions. I think there was maybe one there. This was around 2000 or 2001. We got lost and ended up pulling into a small storage unit place to pull out a map. It was just 2 rectangular buildings, maybe a total of like 20 units. I don't remember why exactly, but I was really scared and kept crying and asking if we could just go back to the hotel. I assume she got fed up with her kid crying in the passenger seat and she couldn't quite figure out where we were, so we went back to the hotel. The next day, they found 2 teenagers in one of the units we pulled in front of. Story 16. I was hammock camping while riding my motorcycle through Arkansas. I had a dream that I was getting pulled over by the cops on my bike. The flashing lights were super bright in my eyes, and as I woke from my dream, I noticed my blue hammock tent was lighting up like flashing police lights. I immediately felt an adrenaline spike and went into full flight mode, packed my stuff up faster than I could even put my boots on, hopped on my bike in my garments, and rode a mile to the top of the campground where the showers were. The second I stepped into the shower cabin, the sky opened up and cloud-to-ground lightning started striking trees in the campground every 10 to 15 seconds. I could have been royally in trouble by a lightning strike had I stayed sleeping between 2 of them. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like button for more videos like this. Story 17. My brother and I were tossing a baseball around near dusk at the bottom of our property, 30 wooded mountain acres way in the middle of nowhere. It had gotten dark enough that we were just about to call it quits when we heard the single most horrifying scream we'd ever heard coming from the trees just beyond the edge of the clearing. Imagine a woman screaming in mortal agony, writhing in the most wretched torment imaginable. Every tortured scream from horror movies, war movies, anything you've ever heard. Nothing compared to this. Even now, decades removed from hearing it, the hair on my arms and neck stands up just thinking of it. And it's made even worse by the realization of what it actually was. A mountain lion. Full-grown female mountain lions scream loudly when they're in heat, and it sounds like a human woman being torn to pieces by the devil himself. To hear that, 2 kids alone in the dark in the middle of nowhere was about as terrifying as it gets. I grabbed his arm and ran, scrambled, fear levitated up the hill faster than ever before or since. It's been 25 years, and I still haven't fully unpuckered. Story 18. Surfing a fairly secluded reef break offshore across a channel. This place is in a very southern state of Australia. Overcast weather, but a still amazing day for waves. I was surfing with the only other guy. We were trading waves and getting to know each other in between sets. I asked what he did for a living, and he was a marine biologist. We'd both recently moved to the area and were new to surfing it as well. Despite it being extremely good surf, after 40 minutes he says, "I don't like this. Something feels off. I feel like I'm being watched, like I'm bait." I didn't want to leave as it was excellent surf, but this guy was a marine biologist, so I took his instinct as a sign to play it safe. We paddled back across the deep channel together as quickly as we could without panicking and walked the 15-minute trek back to the car park talking casually the whole way. I got his number for future surfs together given how small a town it is here and not knowing anyone. We noticed a 15-foot inflatable boat pull up near the reef and hang around for a bit without much thought. Later that night, while looking at my social media, I read about 3 fishermen at the same location we were at that morning, at the same time, in their boat. As they pulled up to check their clay pots on the beach side of the reef, they were circled twice by a great white shark that was as big as their boat. That guy most likely saved me from a very dangerous situation that day. I messaged him with a link to the Facebook page with the comments regarding their experience. Chills ran through my body for a good 20 minutes. He was adamant he felt the presence of something, and he was right. Story 19. A friend called me and said, "There's a wildfire 8 miles away. Can you help me move my horses?" So I drove down. She was wrong. It's 8 miles by car. It was under 2 as the crow flies. We got the first set of horses out and down to another farm. I'm working on the second set, and suddenly things get quiet. It's as if the world stopped for a minute. I look at a horse and the horse looks like it's ready to run. I take a deep breath, and suddenly the noise comes back. The wind is incredibly hot, and the light changes. I told Sherry, the girl I'm helping, "We gotta go now. No time to shove the horses into the trailer. They are smart enough to survive." And I let them loose. We run to the truck and the barn is already on fire. Then we get in the truck and notice the fire had passed us and is blocking the road. So we jumped out and ran to a small pond for the horses. And we dive in hoping the fire doesn't burn us. It was about 20 minutes of intense distress. It might have been longer. I don't know. It was insanely scary, hot, and loud. We got rescued by the fire department's water-dropping helicopter. It landed in the field and pulled us in. We got lucky. The truck was burned to the frame, and the horse Sherry let go passed away. The one I let go survived but was burned. That's most likely the scariest moment. Story 20. Many years ago, I went with my then-girlfriend to one of her female friends' houses, who was married to a guy I'd never met before. I'll call them Jack and Jill so I can tell the story a little easier. We played cards with them for a couple of hours, and it was a good time. But I had an odd feeling the whole time I was there. Something just didn't sit right with me being there with them in their home. The best I can explain it is that I was having an anxious, nervous-like feeling, but having no reason to feel that way. After leaving, I told my girlfriend the feeling I had and that I didn't think we should go back there again because something wasn't right. Fast forward several months to a year or so later, I forgot the exact timeline, Jack terminates Jill in that same home before ending it all. No motive was known. Really horrible events that sent shockwaves through the community, and it's the only time I've ever had that feeling. Story 21. I was an infantry platoon leader in Afghanistan. One night we were on a foot patrol along the outskirts of a town where we were concerned about Taliban activity. I decided to move in closer to get a look at the place without worrying about the people of the town coming and going, which is always stressful. It was about 3 a.m., so everyone was asleep. It was completely silent. My interpreter carried an FM radio that he used to monitor non-secure traffic, which is how the Taliban tended to communicate back then. We hear something in Pashto on his radio, and he very calmly turns to me and says, "Sir, they are saying the ambush is set." I immediately got on my radio and told my squad leaders to halt, and we pulled back and got the heck out of there. That was probably the most intense feeling I've felt in combat. I'm convinced the interpreter saved several lives that night. And when he messaged me during the fall of Kabul asking if I could get his family out, I called every contact I could think of to make sure he got on a flight. They currently live in Seattle where he works in IT. Story 22. I was camping in eastern Arizona with a friend of mine. We like to hike in this particular area that's fairly isolated. We found a place probably 14 or 15 miles deep into the forest on small quad bike trails and set up camp for the night. We put out our fire and go into our tents. Probably about 15 minutes go by. I'm reading a book on my phone, and what I can only describe as a roar sounds like it's about 50 feet away from our campsite. Never in my life have I been so terrified. I had immediate goosebumps and went into full panic mode. My friend and I both get out of our tents, look around, and don't see anything because it's dark as it can be, but run as fast as we can and just hop in a car. We immediately drove off and found a motel about an hour away. I will never forget that sound. I've seen bears in real life and looked up what a bear roar sounds like, and it was nothing like it. The one we heard was almost high-pitched and just filled me with immediate dread. No clue to this day what it was, but I am glad we left immediately out of there. We came back the next day, and everything was as we left it, other than the coals in the fire that were spread around a bit. There was no wind that night, so I don't know what happened. I haven't gone back to that area since, and I have no desire to. Whatever made that noise definitely didn't want us there. Story 23. When I was a teenager, my friends and I were hanging out around midnight. A caravan drives past slowly with a few people looking out the windows. All we do is look at each other, quiet, and the caravan pulls into a nearby parking space. We all get up and walk to our bikes because something feels really off. A few minutes later, we hear someone shout, and as I turned around, there were about 5 or 6 people getting out with metal pipes and other items in their hands. We ran so fast. Nothing happened, but I'm 99% sure we were about to be attacked. Story 24. About a year and a half ago, I got out of a concert hall and I was with my friends with benefits, her friend, and her friend's boyfriend. We walked across the busy street to a bar around 2:30 a.m. at this time. Got a quick tequila shot and a drink to end the night, and we left to call the Uber. We were sitting on the side of the road on a curb waiting for the Uber, and there was a group of people that walked to our side. They just looked like bad news, and they were just looking to cause problems. I looked at my friends with benefits and pulled her up. She looked at me like, what the heck, at first, and then saw the "we need to leave immediately" look in my eyes. So she turned around and said, "We are going," to the other two. Once we got up, not 5 seconds later, shots rang out, and I felt like I got a painful splinter in the back of my leg. But we ran to the cop car across the street to get some cover. As it turns out, I got a fragment of the curb that we were sitting on where the bullet hit exactly where we were sitting in my calf. It was a wild shot that just happened to hit where we were sitting. Unfortunately, someone passed away that night, and my gut feeling saved my friends or myself from a fatal gunshot that wasn't even intended for us. The only reason I knew about a piece of stone embedded in my leg, and it wasn't just a muscle pull from running, was because a cop responded and running by us while we were standing behind the cop car, saw a red liquid on my leg and thought I got shot. A quick statement and ER visit to fish out the half marble-sized shard of stone in my calf while absolutely intoxicated, and I was on my way home at 6 a.m. I didn't really put it all together until I got home thinking, holy smokes, I can't believe I'm alive right now. Story 25. My ex had been planning to have me harmed and make it look like a home invasion. His behavior got shifted in a very odd way the week before. I found out later he had a woman pregnant behind my back and had planned to move her in and ship my kids off to the state. Their dad is already gone. He wanted to collect my life insurance. I got up right after he left for work that early morning, got dressed in the first things I could grab, woke up my kids, and told them we just had to go. I told them not to ask questions right then, that we just had to leave. The door that led from our garage to the inside of our house was always religiously locked. That night, it had been left unlocked. In the weeks leading up to this, our security alarm had been bypassed, and he tried to blame my oldest son when my son didn't even know how to do that kind of thing. My husband taught someone else how to do it. Story 26. Viewing a flat that didn't exist. Not my story, but one my mom told me from her 20s when she was living and working in London, UK. I'll do my best to retell it. Also, I'm dyslexic, so apologies in advance for my grammar. This story always gives me the creeps though when I think about it. So back in her 20s, my mom was living in London and looking to move into a slightly bigger place. She'd found a really good price for a flat slightly out of the area she was hoping for. She called the agent to book a viewing, and that's when things turned odd. The guy booking the viewing started asking weird requests and questions, such as to bring her passport, her age, race, and physical appearance. Would she be coming on her own? Did she have a car or would she be getting a bus? He was very persistent that she should arrive by bus as it would be easier for her, explaining it was a straight road down from the bus stop to the apartment block. Obviously quite unnerved by this call, but still interested because the flat looked ideal, she and my dad, who were dating at the time, decided to check the exterior and surrounding area. The day before the viewing, they drove there, first passing the bus stop he was indicating her to arrive via. From the bus stop, there was about 150 to 200 meters of derelict wasteland that she would have to walk past to get to the flat. And standing at the end of the street in the location this apartment block should have been was a huge abandoned building. Smashed broken windows, graffiti, no entry signs, the lot. Definitely nothing inhabitable in sight. Still, when she tells this today, you can see how much it rightly shook her. Of course, she didn't go to her viewing. However, she informed the police, advising them of the planned time and place. From what she saw from following up with them, they didn't appear to take this tip seriously, and little was done. A couple of years later though, while in a pub with some friends, she gets chatting to a guy she just met through mutual friends that night. He was in the police, and through conversation, her story came up. He said that that area at the time of her viewing was a huge organized crime problem. Still gives me chills. Story 27. My wife and I used to live in a rural exurb outside a large metropolitan area. We were on an interstate about halfway between the city and our home when my wife, who was 6 months pregnant, started having contractions. At the next off-ramp, I turned around and headed back towards the city, planning on heading for an emergency room. I took the very first exit on the outskirts of the city. It was pretty desolate. The only things on the 2-lane road were a couple of rock quarries that were empty after dark. There wasn't much light on the winter darkened evening. I pulled into a gravel turnout just south of the off-ramp, pulled to a stop leaving the engine running, and turned my full attention to my wife. A few minutes passed before my attention was grabbed by a car parked across the turnout, turning their headlights on with high beams. My wife grabbed my arm and said, "We've got to get out of here." And I was like, yeah. So I dropped it in gear and sped down that 2-lane road towards the city. The other car gave chase for a while, but I was flooring my car. I drove a Dodge Stratus. Eventually, we got into civilization and the other car turned around and drove away. We spent the night in the hospital, narrowly avoiding the premature birth of my son. He's 17 now. We guessed I didn't notice that my headlights were shining on an illegal exchange, my attention being on my wife, and it upset the other people. But who knows? Crazies are everywhere. Story 28. I've had a few over the years. Memorable ones are when in the woods with my 1-year-old picking up pine cones. It was about 4 p.m. on a summer's day, so still light and warm. Anyway, suddenly this mixed feeling of dread and fear of being watched came over me. I just picked him up and ran. The next day on our local community Facebook group, another mother reported that her 2 little girls had been exposed to in the woods and quite aggressively. Another one was I was heavily pregnant. I'd went to a hen party just for the meal and then was going home. I was about to call a taxi when the bride insisted the limo she hired drop me home. I thought it was a funny idea for my husband to see me get home in a limo, so I agreed. The driver seemed fine with it and was a nice chatty guy. We're driving home when suddenly he starts detouring. We're by the docks and he starts pulling into some dodgy car park, not saying a word to me. I called my husband right away and very loudly told him the situation and where I was and that I'd be home in 10 minutes. The driver made some excuse about picking something up from a friend, disappeared for 5 minutes, and then took me home. I'm convinced he had bad intentions, and to this day, the regret and pure fear and feeling foolish will never, ever leave me. Ladies, we are never safe. Never presume you are. Story 29. We were driving back from an impromptu family vacation. My husband and I were both driving cars. Too many people, not enough alert drivers. And I was following him. We were in the left lane passing a truck, and I suddenly had an overwhelming feeling that we needed to slow way down and move over immediately. I called him and told him that we needed to get over, go slower than the truck, and turn our hazards on. He thought I was a little crazy, but he learned to listen to my gut feelings and did it. Suddenly, we ran into a freak ice storm and the truck slipped off the road. The car that went past us on the left side slid into incoming traffic, and 3 other cars behind us proceeded to slide off the road. There was a big dip on the side of the road, and one of the cars even tipped over. We somehow came through unscathed and made it home safely. Another time, I was driving to work, and I was behind a work van with ladders on top of it. It wasn't particularly busy on the highway, but someone was behind me somewhat close. I had a horrible feeling wash over me that I needed to move over right away. I moved 1 lane over about 15 seconds before one of the ladders flew off the van. It hit the road right next to me, and the car that was behind me ran over it a little, but luckily wasn't seriously damaged or anything. I've had this feeling several times in my life and have even canceled entire vacations over it. I don't know if anything would have happened for several of them, but I truly think I've avoided some serious trouble. Story 30. Back in 2019, my husband and I and our 2 girls, aged 6 and 9, were on a road trip in the South. We had booked an apartment in Atlanta through Airbnb without knowing the neighborhood at all. It was bad, really sketchy, with a lot of creepy-looking people hanging around. We went into an apartment and immediately my 6-year-old said, "I don't like it here." The door didn't lock properly. The beds were dirty, there was rotting food in the fridge, and the bathroom had not been cleaned in ages. My husband called the owner, who was furious and refused to give us a refund. To de-escalate the situation, my husband offered to not leave a negative review if we could just get our money back. The owner agreed, but asked us to wait for him so they could talk about it in person. As soon as he hung up, I told my husband that we needed to leave now. We hurried to the car, and as we pulled out of the parking garage, we saw the owner driving up with 4 friends. He didn't see us, and we bolted out of there. Ended up at a hotel on the 14th floor. I didn't even feel safe at street level. Story 31. When I was about 8 in 1985, an old El Camino pulled up alongside my friend and I, with a man saying he knew my mom. He did know her name, but something felt off. So I grabbed my friend and ran. When we told my mom, she went white and called the cops. It turns out this guy thought my mom had stolen his job at the steel mill she worked at the time and wanted to hurt her. He already had a warrant out for nearly causing severe harm to his wife that morning. When I was 16, my mom had a terrible feeling about an outing some friends and I were going on. Hindsight being 2020, it was a stupid move for me to go anyway, but I did. Long story short, there was a car accident. My two best friends passed away, and I nearly did. It'll be 30 years in November. I still regret getting in that car every day. My friends might still be alive if I hadn't. My mom had that mama spidey sense she still does. More recently, I was at our other house in the country with my oldest son and his wife and kids. There was a break in the storms, and my son decided to go home instead of spending the night. I was filled with dread and the thought of them going home so late, since we were dealing with intermittent but severe storms. So much dread that I started crying and begging them not to leave. Thankfully, they agreed. We all started home the next morning with them following me and my husband. We came up on this stretch of road that we know has no lights at night, to see police barricading a washed-out bridge and cranes retrieving cars. We all piled out of cars to ask the officers what happened. Apparently, there were several cars that had kept going, not knowing the bridge was out. The lone survivor in the first car had told the police that they went off the bridge at about 9:30 p.m. That's about the time my son wanted to leave. My husband just looked at me, and my boy hugged me extra tight because he knew what could have happened. Story 32. My grandma lives at the far end of a neighborhood, right next to a big, busy street, so there are suspicious characters by her house often. When I was a kid, I visited her every weekend, and one time when I was 11, I was sitting on the living room floor and I heard these two people arguing in Spanish. I hear a lady screaming at the top of her lungs, and having gone to Arizona schools all my life, I recognized every cuss word. Curious, I went to the kitchen and peeked through the window, which looked out onto the street, and something didn't seem right. I felt like I should duck, and the moment I did, the lady pulls a and starts The man she was arguing with was out of my view, so I don't know what happened to him, but I was the only witness to that crime. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.